My husband's comatose first love woke up. He hugged her, crying tears of joy, not knowing I was dead. But his first love never woke up. I possessed her. I took over Joanna's body because 2 days ago, I had asked Felix for a divorce, telling him I was done with our marriage. Felix got angry. He threw the divorce papers at me with a cold face. Lily, you were the one who begged to marry me. Now you want to leave just like that? He also said, you owe Joanna this life. You made her a vegetable, and I want you to live in pain for the rest of your life. Felix said many harsh things. I felt so suffocated. I decided to go hiking on a Friday morning. When I reached the top, my foot slipped, and I fell to my death. When I woke again, it was to a nurse's excited scream, Joanna is awake. It's a miracle. I looked at myself in the mirror, hardly believing it. It was a miracle. I went from being Lily to Joanna, Felix's first love, the person I once wished to become. I woke up in the middle of the night. Felix rushed over when he heard he hugged me like he'd absorbed me into his body. Joanna, you're finally awake. His eyes were red, filled with disbelief as he held my hand. Is this real? Joanna had been in a coma for 5 years. Now she was standing before Felix, completely healed. Of course, he couldn't believe it. I could hardly believe it myself. Joanna, why aren't you speaking? Felix looked at Joanna with concern, eyes filled with tenderness I had never seen before. When Felix looked at me, it was always with indifference and disgust. He turned to the doctor behind him and spoke coldly, give her a full checkup. The results came back quickly, very healthy. Felix, Joanna just woke up. She hasn't adjusted to her surroundings, and she's been lying down for 5 years. It's normal that she can't speak yet. The doctor said excitedly, Joanna is the first person I've seen recover after so many years. I really couldn't speak. It wasn't an act. My vocal cords could only manage single-syllable words. That night, Felix completed Joanna's discharge paperwork and brought me home. Familiar living room, familiar entrance. I instinctively reached for the gray slippers I usually wore. But they didn't fit at all. I almost forgot, I wasn't Lily anymore, I was Joanna. Joanna's feet couldn't fit into Lily's shoes. Felix noticed and searched the shoe cabinet for slippers. He found only Lily's size. Joanna, we only have guest slippers now. You'll have to wear these for tonight. I'll get you new ones tomorrow. I put on the slippers and walked towards the bedroom. Joanna, I had the guest room prepared for you. Before Felix could finish, I opened the master bedroom door. I had left on Friday morning without even taking my phone. As I opened the door, I saw my phone on the nightstand. Joanna, you can't stay here, Felix pulled me back as I was about to enter. He looked at me, tired, this is Lily's room. I looked at him, confused. Felix had once warned me, Lily, everything you have now should belong to Joanna, including me. Didn't that mean Joanna could enter any room she wanted? Lily could come back anytime. She doesn't like people touching her things. Felix's eyes were empty. His fatigue overshadowed his earlier excitement. He sighed, a hint of irritation flashing across his chiseled features. I smiled at him. I won't be back. I'm already dead, fallen from the mountain. Too bad Felix didn't seem to know. Of course, he wouldn't. He never cared about me. How could he know? Felix and I had known each other since childhood, for 27 years. I had loved Felix for 14 of those years. When I was in middle school, 13 years old, innocent and young, a boy from another class asked me to be his girlfriend. I was frightened, hiding in a corner, not knowing what to do. Felix appeared, blocking the boy, she's my girlfriend, get lost. Who was Felix? He was the star of the school. Always top in every subject since the first grade, his family's company was famous locally. Who would dare mess with him? Lily, how can you be so dumb? Can't even refuse a boy? He turned, a youthful face with a smirk, from now on, I'll protect you. From that day, I thought having a boyfriend like Felix wouldn't be bad. So, for 3 years in middle school, I had 2 goals: to get into high school and to chase Felix. Chasing Felix meant studying hard, and I did. I got into the same high school as Felix with the second best scores. On middle school graduation day, I was sick at home. He brought me the acceptance letter. "Lily, what a coincidence. We'll be classmates again," he said. My heart was filled with joy, sniffling from my cold. "Who wants to be your classmate?" Back then, I even thought about him being my husband. But everything changed when high school started. Because of Joanna. Born an orphan, she was different from Felix and me. Naturally frail and vulnerable. When she did poorly on a test, she cried. When bullied, she cried. Her foster parents treated her badly, but she endured. She was really different. She worked part-time, did house chores, and helped her foster parents with laundry. Her life was tough. She was very different. Felix and I often secretly helped her. Soon, the 3 of us were close. I took Joanna to parties, shared secrets with her, including my feelings for Felix. Then school resorted classes. Joanna ended up in Felix's class. I was in the next class. I felt down, but Joanna assured me, "Don't worry, Lily. I'll keep an eye on him for you." But on high school graduation day, Felix held Joanna's hand in front of me. "Lily, I'm with Joanna now. I love her." I remember vividly standing at the end of the corridor, watching Felix lead her away until they disappeared. So, I changed my plans, left the city, and completely cut off contact with them. "Joanna? What do you like? I can buy it for you." Felix's words broke my thoughts. I realized that I had walked to the wardrobe and taken out the red dress from within. This dress was what I wore on the day Felix and I held our engagement party. That day was the happiest and also the most painful day of my life. I took out the scissors from the bedside table and cut the dress into pieces. If I had known marrying Felix would lead to this, I wish none of it had ever started. "Joanna, calm down." Felix reached out and grabbed the scissors, his other hand patting my back gently, his tone soft and full of pity. "You just woke up, your body isn't fully recovered yet, I'll take you away from here." I looked up in a daze at Felix's handsome face. The tension in his eyes seemed full of love. He must really love Joanna. But why, even after I died, should I have to personally experience how much he loves Joanna again? Is this my punishment for marrying him? For the next 3 days, Felix tried to make up for Joanna by turning the entire guest room pink. Neither he nor Joanna mentioned me again, nor did they bring up the red dress I had cut up. Felix took a long vacation just to stay with Joanna, watching him clumsily clean the kitchen and cook for her. But for some reason, I always noticed a subtle emotion in his eyes when he looked at her. Sometimes he glanced at his phone or stared blankly at the TV, or looked out at the pouring rain. There didn't seem to be many topics of conversation between him and Joanna. I guess it's because Joanna had just woken up from being in a coma and couldn't speak. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. My best friend had come looking for me. She knocked so hard, she almost broke the door down. As soon as Felix opened the door, she started yelling, "Where's Lily? Felix, I haven't been able to contact her for 3 days." Linda's face was full of anger as she barged in. She went hiking on Friday and hasn't been heard from since. Her phone doesn't get through. I checked the surveillance at the mountain entrance. She went up but never came down. She brought her phone screen up to Felix's face, showing their chat history. The last message I sent her was, "Linda, I'm going hiking." I didn't reply to any of the videos she sent me afterward. Lily just didn't bring her phone. Felix frowned, his lips pressed into a thin line. See, he just thought I didn't bring my phone. Even so, she wouldn't have not contacted anyone for 3 days. As Linda spoke, her eyes swept towards me, her eyes widened in shock, lips trembling. Felix instinctively stepped forward, blocking Joanna's body. She's awake? Linda looked toward Joanna, her hand trembling as she pointed. No wonder, no wonder you don't care about Lily at all, it's because of her again. Felix, Lily was the one your family begged to marry. She's just gone missing, and you've already brought Joanna home? Felix, have you no conscience? It's been pouring rain these past few days. What if Lily is trapped on the mountain? Felix, if you didn't love her and she wanted a divorce, why didn't you just let her go? Linda vented all her anger in one breath, her eyes red as she held back her emotions. My matters with Lily are none of your business. When we get divorced is up to me. Felix smirked, his expression full of scorn, a look I often saw on him as if I owed him something. Joanna was in a coma for 5 years because Lily hit her with a car. When Lily comes back, she has to properly take care of Joanna to make up for it. He shut the door forcefully, pushing Linda out. He turned around, looking at Joanna, the emotion in his eyes couldn't hide his melancholy. Did she scare you? Lily always likes to use these tricks to get my attention, so childish. Felix wearily waved at me. It's late, you should rest. I stared blankly at him. I had come back to this city because Felix's father had approached my grandfather, proposing an arranged marriage between our families. His father said, Felix always had feelings for Lily. The two kids were close when they were young. It would be a blessing if they got together. That night, I received a message from Felix, let's get married. I specifically asked someone to look into Felix's relationship status and Joanna's situation. The feedback and answers were that they had broken up long ago. Felix was single. In college, many people pursued me, but I subconsciously compared everyone to Felix. My grandfather said, rather than marrying someone you don't like, marry someone you do. I thought, that's true. So I happily agreed to marry him. But on our engagement party, Felix didn't show up. Became the talk of the event. Some even said Felix didn't want to marry me. On our wedding day was the first time in years I saw him alive, but he didn't even look me in the eye. All I remember is him toasting non-stop, reeking of alcohol. My anticipated wedding night was also ruthlessly destroyed by him. Felix cornered me in the bathroom, his grip tight on my jaw. Marrying me, happy? Lily, I'll give you anything you want. All I remember is it hurt so much that I bit his shoulder, leaving a scar. Later, I found out that this marriage proposal was just a scam. The Felix group's cash flow had dried up, and without Felix's consent, they arranged our marriage and secretly sent Joanna abroad. So from the beginning, Felix hated me. He even believed it was all part of my scheme. Joanna? Why are you still standing? Felix reached out to pull Joanna, but halfway through, he withdrew his hand. There was a hint of conflict in his eyes. Your legs are not well, go rest. I averted my gaze, returned to the guest room, turned off the light, and quickly fell asleep. I even hoped that when I woke up, I could escape this body and get away from Felix, never to encounter him again in my next life. In the middle of the night, I woke up. Still in Joanna's body, I sighed lightly and went downstairs to get some fresh air. But I didn't expect to hear Felix's stern voice. Find her. Find her immediately. Search the whole mountain if you have to. The study door was slightly open, and I could see his computer screen. It showed the video of me entering the mountain trail. What do you mean, a rainy day? It's been 3 days already. Not another minute can be wasted. Pay them triple. I noticed the veins throbbing on Felix's temple. He appeared both frantic and agitated. Could he actually be looking for me? Joanna? Felix saw Joanna standing at the door and closed his laptop. Why are you awake? Can't sleep? His tone was always slow and gentle when he spoke to Joanna. I ignored him and noticed a shredded divorce agreement in the trash can, with my signature on it. That's the divorce agreement Lily gave me. I saw Felix sneer. She asked for a divorce and then disappeared. Suddenly, I wanted to know why Felix refused the divorce. I squatted down, picked up a corner of the agreement, and pointed at the unsigned area. Surely, he would tell Joanna the truth. I'm not signing it. He hesitated slightly, then quickly understood my meaning, sneering, she owes me. How could I just let her go so easily? Owes him? Ridiculous. I pulled out my phone, which I hadn't taken up the mountain, and found the old texts Felix had sent. I had kept those texts, not wanting to delete them before, and now they were evidence. Wasn't this all just Felix and his father's manipulation? How did it become something where I owe him? I told you not to touch Lily's things. Felix reached for the phone, a complex emotion flashed in his eyes. He pressed his lips together, seemingly displeased. Yet, just as he was about to grab the phone, he saw the content on the screen. Let's get married. The phone number was his, and the message was from him. This isn't from me. Felix examined the phone number closely. Joanna, stop messing with her stuff. She won't be happy when she comes back. He snatched the phone from my hand and then grabbed Joanna's hand, leading her to the bedroom. I'll be busy for a few days. Stay here and don't wander around. Felix rubbed his temples wearily. Just as he was about to leave, I reached out and grabbed him. It wasn't me holding him, my hand moved on its own. During these 2 days in Joanna's body, aside from feeling uncomfortable, I frequently couldn't control her body at all, often experiencing moments of complete loss of control. Like when I tried to leave but couldn't step outside the door. Or like now. I hugged Felix from behind. No, Joanna hugged him from behind. Time seemed to stand still. Felix was silent. I tried to withdraw Joanna's hands, but they remained out of my control. After a while, Felix sighed, removed Joanna's hands, and said, Joanna, a lot has happened in the 5 years you were unconscious. You saw it earlier, Lily and I are still married. We're not divorcing. What happened 5 years ago, I'm sorry. I'll try to make it up to you. But between us, it ended the moment you went abroad. Felix spoke these words with difficulty and didn't dare to look up at Joanna, perhaps feeling guilty. After Felix left, Joanna stood in the room for a long time before I regained control over her body. I lay down and quickly fell asleep. The next few days, I didn't see Felix. He sent a nanny to take care of Joanna. Lately, it had been raining heavily every day, so we couldn't dry the clothes. During a nap, I overheard the nanny complaining about the endless rain. It had been raining for days. I tried to leave the house again, but as soon as I reached the door, my body went stiff, and I failed once more. Forget it, a nap might help. Maybe I could leave Joanna's body. I barely closed my eyes when a loud noise woke me up. Curious, I headed to the door and saw Felix's assistant helping him towards the main bedroom. Felix was soaked through, his defined face as pale as a sheet, and he seemed too weak to walk. What happened? I typed. Miss Joanna, Felix has a fever. I've called the family doctor, don't worry, the assistant said, trying to reassure me. I wasn't worried at all. Felix had a high fever, looked ghostly pale, and was delirious, constantly muttering. The doctor hooked him up to N4, it seemed urgent. I glanced at him briefly, uninterested in his half-dead state, and turned to leave. But my feet moved on their own towards the main bedroom, and I ended up sitting by Felix's bedside. Was Joanna worried about Felix, so she couldn't leave? Miss Joanna, it's so good that you're here to take care of Felix's fevers at 104 degrees. If it doesn't break by tonight, we'll need to hospitalize him. The assistant sighed deeply, with you here, he'll recover faster. But I'm Lily. I tried to lift my legs to leave but instead found myself holding Felix's hand. His hand was scorching hot, like it was burning up. If Joanna didn't want to leave, fine. I calmly watched him. Felix's lips were pale, his brows deeply furrowed, and though the water droplets on his body had been wiped away, a thin layer of sweat covered his forehead. This is the first time I've seen Felix look so defeated. Where did he go? I took a deep breath. Coming back with a fever after being caught in a storm and needing support, was he? Water. Felix's thin lips parted as he blinked his eyes drowsily. I reached for the water but hesitated and pulled my hand back. I remembered 5 years ago, just after Joanna returned from abroad, I had an accident where the brakes failed, and I hit her, leaving her in the hospital in a vegetative state. It happened so suddenly. I was terrified and came down with a high fever. How could I explain to Felix that it wasn't intentional? He wouldn't believe me anyway. To him, I was the one who ruined Joanna's future. He thought I was jealous of Joanna and harbored ill intentions. I still remember how he angrily shook off my hand, shouting, "Lily, you're so malicious. Joanna's in this condition, and you still deny it? A fever is your punishment." Even later, when my grandfather found evidence of the brake failure, Felix still didn't believe it. He hated me so much that after my grandfather passed away, he took over our company. Water. Felix's raspy voice interrupted my thoughts. "Lily, give me some water." I was startled. Did he just call me Lily? Is he delirious from the fever? Before I could react, he reached out for the water cup in my hand, but his grip was unsteady, and he knocked the water onto the floor. "Lily, what's wrong? Why won't you give me water?" he murmured, with a hint of grievance in his expression. Just like when he was a child. In elementary school, Felix was weak and skinny, not very articulate. He followed me around all day, calling me boss. If I raised my voice at him even a bit, he'd nervously fiddle with his clothes and look at me, all upset. That expression? Just like now. But when did things switch between us? After middle school? When Joanna showed up? Or after I married him? "Lily, I don't feel well, touch my forehead, it's burning." He haphazardly grabbed Joanna's hand, looking at Joanna's face but calling my name. I shook off his hand and stood up. "Lily, Lily," he stubbornly grabbed for Joanna's hand again, still dazed, his eyes red and breathing ragged. "I can't find you." "Where are you?" Grabbing Joanna's hand, his tone grew tougher, more domineering. "Lily, I said no divorce, no ending." Right as he finished speaking, the door opened. Felix's assistant stood there, looking awkward. "Miss Joanna, sorry, Felix has a fever and is talking nonsense." He placed the medicine by the door, unsure whether to stay or leave. And why not feel awkward? Seeing the CEO holding Joanna's hand but calling my name? "Miss Joanna, Felix has been looking for Lily these past few days." The assistant cleared his throat, explaining reluctantly, "Lily went missing while hiking. It's been a week now. We're afraid the worst has happened. We've nearly combed the whole mountain but still haven't found her." So Felix really went looking for me. This man who detests me to the core, trying to act all devoted. Shouldn't he just abandon me and be blissfully with Joanna? I'm too tired, not wanting to get entangled in their relationship anymore. But I never expected that the next day, Felix brought Linda. This time, Linda was practically dragged here by him. Felix's condition was much better compared to yesterday. At least when he looked at Joanna, he didn't call my name anymore. But I didn't expect that after waking up, I'd see Linda in the living room looking paler than Felix. "Felix, you didn't call me here just to see how lovely you and Joanna are together, did you?" Linda coldly glanced at Joanna, then shifted her eyes away. "No need. I don't care about your affairs." She probably bore hostility toward Joanna because of me. "What are you and Lily up to? Did you hide her?" Felix's face was dark as he looked at Linda. "Hand her over. You really are presumptuous. Do you think Lily is hiding just to test if you care about her? Ridiculous. Who do you think you are?" Linda's eyes were red, biting her lip. "She's been missing this long and hasn't called or contacted me." Felix silently curled his lip, and I saw his hand clenching into a fist. Then he weakly stood up from the sofa. "Looks like you don't plan to speak the truth. Take her to the mountain. I don't believe Lily would just watch you fall." There was a frightening emotion in his eyes, and I was startled. Instinctively, I blocked Linda's path and grabbed her hand. Linda froze. Felix was also stunned. "What are you doing? Don't pretend to care." Linda met Joanna's eyes and pulled her hand back. Linda never liked Joanna. "Joanna, move." Felix was impatient, still feverish with bloodshot eyes, as he grabbed Linda and headed out. Afraid something might happen, I hurriedly followed. This time, Joanna's body didn't stop me from leaving, but I couldn't catch Felix's car. He drove off toward the mountain with Linda. I glanced at Felix's assistant, signaling him to follow Felix's car. But when I got to the top of the mountain, Linda was pinned against the edge by Felix. Felix is a total madman. I stood not far away, clearly hearing Felix's words. He threatened Linda, word by word, "I'm giving you one last chance to call her. I need to see Lily, right now." "Felix, have you regretted it?" Linda glanced at his tightly gripped phone and curled her lips coldly. "Afraid Lily will leave you? Afraid she'll divorce you? Regretting it?" "Yes, she loved you so much, idolized you, cooked for you every day. And how did you treat her? You threw her food in the trash like garbage. You treated her like a villain. You grew up together, don't you know her personality?" "Oh, right, because of Joanna. You're blind now." Linda clenched her fists, her eyes turning colder as she saw Joanna. Even to her child. My heart ached, making it hard to breathe. 5 years ago, I accidentally got pregnant with Felix's child, but the baby didn't survive because Joanna had a fever and complications. Later, every time Felix pushed me against the bed, he would grip my jaw and remind me, "Lily, you're not worthy to carry my child." Luckily, that never happened again. "Stop talking nonsense and call her." Felix's eyes looked emotionless, his voice cold and commanding, "Or I'll really do something drastic." His emotions seemed uncontrollable, making him look like an enraged wolf, ready to explode at any moment. "She abandoned you," Linda said, her eyes red and her lips curling up. "She left you and me." "That's nonsense." Felix understood what she was implying and walked forward, getting close to Linda. Linda stood on the edge, teetering, with stones rolling under her feet. She couldn't move back anymore. I was afraid he might do something extreme. I quickly ran over, grabbed Felix's hand, and tried to pull him back. He turned his head and saw Joanna, glaring at me menacingly. He was truly furious and volatile. "She's dead." Linda suddenly laughed, her eyes becoming vacant. "Lily is dead. Are you satisfied now?" Linda took us to the funeral home. I lay there quietly, looking like I was asleep. Silent, my face pale like paper, my body a bit swollen. I saw the wounds on my body stitched up, looking so unreal. I always took care of myself, but now I appeared so disheveled, like myself but not. "Did you see? Satisfied?" Linda's voice echoed, hoarse. "Felix, Lily is dead. When you didn't want to find her, I found her first. She was covered in wounds, soaked by the rain. Poor Lily. She cherished her body and always wanted to look her best for you. Too bad you didn't appreciate it. Now you got what you wanted. Lily is dead, but Joanna is back, standing healthy in front of you. You got your wish." I saw Felix's knuckles turning white as he clenched his fists, veins bulging on his forehead, his face pale. He seemed frozen, unable to move. His bloodshot eyes stared at my body, his face full of disbelief. "Knowing Lily, she wouldn't want you to see her like this," Linda said, wiping her tears. Though trying to control her emotions, she continued, "But I think you should remember her like this. She will soon be taken away." "No." Felix's face turned a little pale, his voice trembling. "Without my permission, no one can touch her." I was placed in the freezer storage. After returning home, Felix locked himself in the study for 3 days, without eating or drinking. He didn't even take a sip of water, forbidding anyone from disturbing him. "Miss Joanna, please go check on Felix. He won't get mad at you," the assistant said, looking troubled. But I couldn't care less. If Felix felt any sadness, it might only be because he remembered the past and felt sad about a life suddenly disappearing. I turned to head to the bedroom, but my feet moved uncontrollably. Joanna's body walked toward the study, abruptly pushing the door open. "Get out." Felix's weak voice, mixed with rage, came from near the bookshelf, surrounded by empty wine bottles, seeming to be destroying himself. His eyes were bloodshot, glaring at Joanna with fury. "Get out." His tone softened when he saw it was Joanna. Joanna walked to him and squatted down, somehow finding the strength to lift him from the floor. Felix's body was burning hot. "I'm telling you to get out," he said, shaking Joanna off, pointing at the study door. "Joanna, I feel terrible. You need to leave." I thought, maybe Felix didn't want Joanna to see him in such a sorry state, with stubble and messy. But honestly, Felix still looked handsome, even now. Sadly, looking at his face, I felt nothing. Yet Joanna insisted on taking him to the master bedroom to rest. Then she went to the kitchen to make him some hangover soup. As soon as she entered the kitchen, her body control came back to me. It was interesting. I understood Joanna's intention, wanting Felix to sober up and not ruin his body because of me. But she didn't know how to make hangover soup. So, she left the cooking to me. I took 2 pears, some black and white fungus, and a bit of rock sugar from the fridge to make a bowl of hangover soup for Felix. He used to be the group's president, often socializing and getting drunk every late night. When he came home drunk, I would cook the hangover soup for him. This he never refused. He hated stomach discomfort more than he disliked my soup. After adding the rock sugar, I took the soup to the master bedroom. Felix was half lying on the bed, eyes squinting, breathing lightly. He glanced at the hangover soup. Then he fixed his gaze on Joanna. Suddenly, he stretched out his big hand, grasped Joanna's wrist, and pulled her into his arms. "You're back." I knew it. That was just a nightmare. He held Joanna tightly, his voice trembling. "Lily, we're not getting divorced. Don't leave me." What's going on? Why did he mistake someone else again? "Don't go," Felix whispered, unconsciously tightening his grip. "I know you're lying to me, trying to set me up to leave me. Have you had enough? If so, then come back." His head leaned heavily on Joanna's shoulder. I could feel his strength, and I could feel his warmth. I could also clearly smell the alcohol on his breath, which landed near my ear. He seemed pained and repressed, holding me and never letting go. "What are you upset about?" I wanted to ask and ended up blurting it out. Besides my voice being raspy, I could still speak. I clearly felt Felix stiffen. His grip tightened, then loosened. He replied to me, and then said, "You promised you wouldn't leave me." Yeah, I indeed said that. When Felix was little, he was bullied. He was too skinny and introverted. So after I dealt with those who bullied him, I would always pat his shoulder and say, "Ah, Felix, I'll protect you. I'll never abandon you. I won't leave you. From now on, you're with me. I'm the boss." "Felix, let's pinky swear." Turns out he still remembers. I thought he had long forgotten. "Lily, I know you're mad at me, but you shouldn't use this method." His bloodshot eyes stared blankly at Joanna. His tone softened. "Whatever you want, I can give it to you." "Really?" I smiled. "What about your life?" Felix was really drunk. Whenever he drank, he'd start speaking nonsense. And with his fever yet to subside, his words were even more absurd. He stared straight at me without answer. I stood up, pulling a smile. "Just kidding. Don't take it seriously." The hangover soup was ready. I was about to leave when Felix grabbed my wrist again. "If you want it, I'll give it." "Then what if I want Joanna to disappear?" My voice was raspy and low, but it was clear Joanna didn't stop me. She seemed to want to know Felix's answer too. "She can't." This time, Felix replied firmly. I could clearly feel Joanna exhale deeply, her tense state melting away. Of course, Felix had shown how much he cared for me recently, braving the storm to find me. When he heard I was dead, he fell into despair. Still shouting "Lily, Lily," remembering our childhood promise. But everything changes if Joanna is involved. I'm not surprised. I glanced at Felix, shaking off his hand. "Lily, I owe her. If it weren't for her, I might have died long ago. She'll never have children because of me. It's my debt. It's my fault." Felix muttered, his lips pale. He coughed heavily, his body trembling. That's your debt. What does it have to do with me? I laughed. Felix, marrying you was my choice. But the way you treated me afterward made me tired and weary. I've told you countless times about the breaks. I don't know what went wrong. I'll say it one last time. It wasn't me. I wouldn't even bother doing it. Joanna's life doesn't matter to me. I can discard you anytime as well. Felix, you're right. This time, I'm abandoning you. I didn't look at Felix's expression anymore. Returning to my room, looking at Joanna's face in the mirror, I saw a glimmer of triumph in eyes that didn't belong to me. She was triumphant. Joanna won. She won all these years because when Felix was cornered in the alley, she saved him. Felix carried her to the hospital, where the doctor said she could never have children due to abdominal injuries. This happened in high school. I only found out after marrying Felix. Joanna, do you think you've really won? Staring into her eyes, I wondered if Felix's feelings for you were love or guilt. And about you not being able to have children, did it happen because you saved Felix or because your foster parents punished you by making you lie in the snow? And the breaks, were you the one who tampered with them? My grandpa suspected something back then. I delved into it, discovering other cars' dashcams captured Joanna getting into my car. But even if I put this evidence in front of Felix, he wouldn't believe it. I admit defeat. In terms of ruthlessness, I can't compare to you. Joanna, using your life to mess with my relationship with Felix was quite clever. To me, the truth doesn't matter anymore. I looked away, smiling. I heard a knock on the door. It was Felix. When I opened it, he pushed his way in, checking everywhere, still looking exhausted but with a strangely clear mind. Lily, is she here? He looked around, checking every corner, even under the bed. His assistant John stood behind him, looking apologetic. Sorry to disturb you, Miss Joanna. Felix, Lily hasn't been home. She's already. Shut up. Felix shot a stern look at his assistant. His chiseled face looked a bit gaunt. She must be here. She talked to me a lot yesterday. His body was trembling slightly. He walked up to Joanna, his brows furrowed. Did you make the hangover soup yesterday? I nodded. Impossible. It must be Lily who made it. The sweetness, even the number of rock sugars, was just like what she used to make. Felix's lips trembled with excitement. It was Lily. It had to be Lily. Felix didn't like rock sugar. He said he didn't like its taste, but I always put 3 pieces in his hangover soup. Turns out he remembered. I moved my lips to speak, but my voice failed me again. I couldn't say a word. She's definitely here. She hasn't left. Felix searched the room several more times in vain. Finally, he sat on the floor, covering his face, very despondent. He still hasn't accepted? I'm sure. I'm sure she talked to me yesterday. Felix said, his body trembling even more. The assistant stood by, looking awkwardly at Joanna, unsure what to say. Felix stubbornly searched the entire villa several more times before the assistant took him to the funeral home. I heard he stood by my body for a long time. Long enough that when he returned, he looked even more haggard and thin. This time, he looked seriously into Joanna's eyes. He reached out, grabbing her hand. Come to the study with me. I have something to say. Felix locked the door. He kept pushing Joanna until she was backed up against the bookshelf. He stared at her, like he had been looking for a long time, and then let out a deep breath. Joanna, things with Lily are done. I'm exhausted these past few days. At least the Lu family has an answer now. Lily wants a divorce. I want to give her closure too. He pulled out a phone, his brows furrowed. Her phone has the divorce papers. Even if she might already be a widow, she wanted a divorce, so I'll give it to her. I recognized immediately that it was my phone. All the sadness and heartache were in the past. Remembering her as a child, it felt like so much time had flown by. He massaged his temples. Joanna, but that's all behind us now. Let's fulfill Lily's last wish. Print the divorce papers again, and I'll sign them. Let the divorce papers go with Lily, and get out of our lives completely. He placed the phone in my hand. I stared at the phone for a long time. Instagram kept buzzing with messages from Linda. She sent a lot, all saying how much she missed me. I opened it by reflex, entered the password, and read Linda's messages. She had not accepted that I was gone. Maybe after all this ends, I can leave Joanna's body and have nothing to do with Felix or Joanna anymore. The documents. I don't know where they are, Felix muttered to himself. I saved them in a separate folder on the phone. I found it and sent it to him. But when our eyes met, I realized something. My heart raced uncontrollably. I took a deep breath, feeling the blood freeze in my veins. This was all wrong. Lily, you're Lily. Felix stared at me, holding my hand. You're not Joanna. You're Lily. His certainty made it hard to breathe. This was a trap. Everything Felix had said was a trap. Joanna has been in a coma for 5 years. Felix smirked bitterly. She doesn't know my stomach hurts when I work too hard, or how to make hangover soup. She wouldn't know I hate sweets, or that Lily always uses exactly 3 sugar cubes. Even I didn't know Lily's phone password. Linda said she didn't know Lily's phone password either. Felix slowly advanced, his eyes glowing. If you're Joanna, how do you know? And know where the divorce papers are saved? You're not Joanna, you're Lily. He spat out a bunch of words, clutching my shoulders tightly. That day wasn't a dream. You want my life, right? Lily, take my life. I'll give it to you. You come back to life. Turns out, even in Joanna's body, he would recognize me. Maybe I've been by his side too long. He was used to so many things that even in his drowsy moments, he would call out my name. I'm already dead, Felix. I chuckled softly. This time Joanna's voice was clear and pleasant. Forever leaving you, never appearing in your world again. I could feel the strength draining from my body. Joanna seemed angry, she was pushing me out. No, I said you can't go. Felix tightened his grip on my hand, staring in a daze. Lily, without my permission, you can't leave. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do, even if it costs me my life. His voice faded from my hearing, sounding hollow. The feel of his hand grew stiff. Why would I want Felix's life? I just wanted to get far away from him. Despite feeling his pain, his reluctance, and his feelings for me. So what? Truly, the saying is right, late affection is worthless. I saw Joanna fall in front of me, saw Felix call for an ambulance. Saw him stay by her side, waiting for her to wake up. Eventually Joanna did wake up, but I couldn't go back. I saw Felix realize right away that Joanna wasn't me, saw him leave the hospital shattered, crying in a corner. I even heard him mutter, "Why come back if you left? Why leave again if you came back?" He repeated over and over. Later, I sent Linda a message asking her to arrange my burial, sprinkling my ashes on a mountain. Linda did it without opposition from Felix. But ever since, he would sit on that mountain from morning till night. When Joanna awoke, he ignored her. My guess was right, Felix would soon discover Joanna's old tricks. He would live his life with guilt towards me. And in my next life, I won't meet him again.